cool. And are we going, for like half an hour, 45 minutes kind of thing? And
Kind of, yeah. 45 minutes tops, probably. Is that cool?
Yeah, cool.
I'm running a 5-mile race in a few hours after this. So I have to, like, at some point eat some carbs or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
I haven't trained for it at all. So it's going to be great. It's only 97 degrees here right now.
Gosh.
You know, it's funny. Every single one of us shares one really shitty habit. At some point in our journey through this weird, beautiful, mystical little planet, we postpone our lives. I'll call them tomorrow. When I have a little bit more money, then I'll chase that dream. I'll tell them I love them next time. It feels kind of weird to say it right now. And somehow, later quietly stretches into years. I'm wildly guilty of it myself. I'll put off making a phone call so I can watch the same episode of Parks and Rec or Modern Family for the 18th time. Or I'll wake up to a gorgeous summer day thinking, man, I should go see my dad. Maybe call up some old friends. Head to the beach. But then Michael Scott starts his own paper company and suddenly, well, I've got plans. Maybe the problem isn't that we don't know our time is limited. I mean, deep down, we all know that. Maybe the problem is that we keep living like it isn't. Because the moment mortality quietly pulls up a chair, it starts asking some uncomfortable questions. Are you spending your time the way you actually want to? Are you becoming the person you'd hoped you'd be? Are you still waiting for someday? And strangely enough, that's where life gets brighter. People matter more. Dreams get louder. Ordinary Tuesdays start feeling a whole lot less, ordinary. Because that series finale is probably a lot closer than we'd all like to believe. So maybe it's time to start releasing some absolute banger episodes of your own life. The kind that'll leave you with as little regret as possible. I'm Dan Bradley, and this is Braving the Bright Side. Hello, Brightsiders, and welcome back to, The Bright Side. I hope you're all doing well as we round the corner here and head into the final stretch of the summer. It does kind of feel like winter lasted about 23 months, while summer somehow kind of feels like 23 days. I don't know. It just feels like winter never ended and summer was barely here. Like it waved hello, and then now it's already gone. To be fair, a lot of my annual summer tent poles are already in the rearview mirror. The Media 5-miler, Love Island, USA, my little sister April's birthday. Shout out, April. Happy birthday. A handful of pool parties. All the good stuff that somehow flies by faster every year. Now, while I'm not exactly counting down the days until yet another Pennsylvania winter, I am incredibly excited about what's already ahead. As many of you know, Braving the Bright Side has slowly been growing into something much bigger than just a podcast. I've probably teased a dozen different projects over the past year alone, and I promise, a website is coming where it'll be all finally kind of have one home and easier to follow than just my scattered brain throwing stuff all over this microphone. Whatever that means. But this next chapter, this one has me genuinely fired up. Braving the Bright Side has officially partnered with my good friend, Brad McClanahan, and his incredible team at Bespoke Content Creation to launch Brave Docs, a cinematic mini documentaries that celebrate extraordinary people, their journeys, and the ripple effect they've created in their communities. It's a huge step forward for this mission, and honestly, I could not be more excited. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be crazy. And our very first project, boy howdy, I'm glad you asked. In about 8 hours, Brad and I will be boarding a plane to Springfield, Illinois to cover the historic inaugural opening weekend of the Women's Professional Baseball League, WPBL. The Bright Side will be there alongside media from around the world, documenting a milestone not just for baseball, but for women's professional sports and everyone who's ever dreamed of seeing opportunities like this become a reality. Throughout the weekend, I'll be sharing interviews, behind-the-scenes moments, and plenty of updates across all the Bright Side social channels, so keep an eye out. Then, in the coming weeks, we'll premiere our very first Brave Doc, following the incredible women helping write the first chapter of a brand new era in professional baseball. I honestly cannot wait to share it with you. All right, that's enough housekeeping. I've got a full show for you today, and well, once I'm done recording this, I'm actually jumping into a theater to go see Spider-Man Brand New Day. Happy Spider-Man Brand New Day to all those who celebrate before I'm catching a flight to Illinois. So one thing you can say about me is I like to cram as much stuff into one day as humanly possible. But enough about that. Let's kick things off with some feel-good news. All right, let's hit that dopamine button for a minute, shall we? It's time for this week's feel-good news segment, the part of the show where we take a break from the chaos and remind ourselves that there are still a whole lot of good people doing incredible things in this world. So let's shine a little light on some stories that deserve it, shall we? All right, starting off with number 8. We're going to count from 8 down to 1. I'm going to try this out for the first time ever. It's going to be crazy. Okay, here we go. Number 8, scientists discover new avocado varieties. Boy, howdy. Researchers have identified previously unknown avocado varieties, I hate saying that word, that could be more resistant to disease and climate change, helping protect one of the world's favorite foods from years to come. So there you go. Protect it from disease and climate change. Number 7, Lumberjack Championship makes history. A Czech competitor turned heads with a record-setting performance at the World Lumberjack Championships, proving there really is a world championship for everything. And excellence comes in all forms. Number 6, Texas ranch helps city kids rediscover the night sky, which is just a wild headline. A Texas ranch is using remote-operated telescopes so people living under bright city lights can experience breathtaking views of the stars from hundreds of miles away. Number 5, Native American students reach record graduation rates. Schools serving Native American communities have reached the highest graduation rates ever recorded, highlighting years of dedication from students, families, educators, and tribal leaders. Number 4, New Zealand protects more of the ocean. 5 new marine reserves will preserve thousands of acres of ocean habitat, protecting dolphins, reefs, kelp forests, and countless marine species for generations to come. Number 3, India successfully launches its first private rocket. India celebrated a major milestone as its first privately built rocket successfully launched into space, opening a new chapter for innovation and exploration. Number 2, this was a big one on the news. You guys might have heard about this. 4 rescued beluga whales get a fresh start. I like saying that, beluga whales. 4 belugas rescued from a closed marine park have safely arrived at the Shed Aquarium, where they'll receive expert care before eventually being moved to a seaside sanctuary. So, good for those beluga whales. And finally, our number 1 story this week is a reminder that sometimes the greatest breakthroughs aren't about living longer, just living more fully. And number 1, a brain implant gives a man his independence back. Boy, howdy. Researchers developed a groundbreaking double neural bypass that allowed a man living with paralysis to regain control of his arm and hand. For the first time in years, he can feed himself. And, some would even argue, possibly even more importantly, he can even pet his dog again. This isn't just scientific achievement, it's a deeply human one. It's about dignity, independence, and giving someone back pieces of everyday life that most of us never really have to think twice about. And that is your feel-good news segment for the week. Never let the headlines convince you that kindness, hope, and progress are rare. All right? They're happening every single day. You just have to know where to look, unfortunately. Alrighty then, let's switch up gears and get ready to jump into this week's interview, shall we? Most of us spend our lives trying not to think about the end, right? But what if the very thing we spend so much energy avoiding is actually the key to living with more courage, gratitude, and purpose? In today's conversation, we're challenging some deeply held assumptions about mortality, fear, and regret, and exploring how remembering that our time is limited might be the very thing that helps us make the most of it. Here's my conversation with John Hopkins. Most of us spend our lives trying not to think about one unavoidable truth, that our time here is limited. But what if the very thing we avoid the most, death itself, is actually the key to living with more courage, clarity, and purpose? Today's guest believes that confronting mortality isn't dark or depressing. It can be liberating. John Hopkins is the founder of Aliveness and a leading voice in the growing conversation around mortality awareness and living without regret. Hoppy, welcome to the bright side, my friend. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah, man. Thanks for calling in. You're calling in from Sweden right now, right?
That's right. I'm in the Swedish archipelago south of Stockholm.
Man. Yeah. Sounds absolutely gorgeous, dude.
It is. It's a beautiful wilderness out here. It's amazing.
I can tell by the small little window behind you. It looks it looks beautiful there. Well, here in Philly, it's beautiful too. Instead of trees, we have broken glass. But that's just as nice, I feel like, really.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I know you're a busy guy, so let's get into it, especially for people who don't know who you are and what you're doing. I find it fascinating, when we connected and you told me kind of what you do and what you've kind of jumped into as your life purpose here. Because all of us are familiar with mortality and death, as much as we don't like to talk about it. Most of us spend our lives trying not to think about death and try to avoid that. You've built your work around the idea that confronting mortality might actually be the key to living fully. What led you to that realization?
Good question. I, from a young age, always wanted to be a film director. That was my dream. And I made that dream into reality in my 20s. And I became a successful filmmaker, directing TV ads and feature films. And then I took a turn and set up a drone display company called Celestial in 2020.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I saw a drone display that happened at the Korean Winter Olympics. And it blew my mind. I was like, oh my God, I think the sky is going to be the next screen. And I had a good go at films, and I just fancied a new challenge. And I felt this new artistic medium in the sky would inspire people into better ways of living through this sort of epic storytelling, this kind of seeing stars come to life. And it was partly my effort to move away from a life where I was more in service to myself. Like many of us are, we have our self-interests first and foremost. And I wanted to do something more in service to others, but it didn't quite work out. And as a result of it not quite working out for me, there were some crises at work. I started having panic attacks at work. And as I was having these panic attacks about 3 or 4 years ago, it was triggering memories of near-death experiences I'd had across my life that I never really joined up the dots before. And I was listening to a philosopher called Ramdas. He's one of my favorite philosophers. And he said several times in his podcast night, where I was listening to him trying to calm my nerves so I could sleep through the night. And he said that sitting with dying people was the highest work he'd ever done.
Wow. Yeah.
And I had this idea popped into my head that, hey, I've had these death experiences. Maybe I'm supposed to work with dying people. And my purpose came at me like a 10-ton rhino, and it was death. And I couldn't resist it as much as I tried, because I was like, please, just not this.
Yeah. I mean, a rhino named Death charging at you.
Yeah. But it was, anyway, my purpose washed over me. It deepened in that moment. It was like a visceral, physical experience that I had. I remember the sort of tingles going through my body as I was like, oh, crap, this is my purpose deepening here. And it was terrifying and electrifying at the same time. And so I then became an end-of-life guide and went and volunteered in the local hospital sitting with dying people. But something amazing started to happen that I wasn't expecting, which is as I started to study death and consciousness, I started to see firstly, a massive problem, which is nobody wants to talk about death in the West, even though death is the only thing in life that's guaranteed. You know, we've been conditioned in our society to believe that death is an inconvenience. It's a something to fight against. It's an enemy, rather than it being a natural part of life and the only thing in life that's guaranteed. I want to talk more about the only thing in life that's guaranteed. And then that logic led to seeing that if you start to acknowledge your mortality on a routine basis, the fears that build and grow out of our avoidance of death, because our avoidance of death leads to all sorts of fears being bred. Because all fears, what I've realized, grow out of the fear of death. It's like grandmother fear from which all smaller fears emerge. So all our modern fears, from fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of intimacy, fear of public speaking, can be traced back through our sort of ancient wiring to basic survival instincts that we had for hundreds of thousands of years. But because mortality has now been passed under the carpet, and we are addressing all of the auxiliary thing, spending billions of dollars, by the way, trying to solve mental health problems, and no one's realizing that the root of these problems comes from our avoidance of this massive fear, which usually lies silent because we're not confronted with life-threatening situations on a daily basis, unless, of course, you're unlucky enough to be living in the Ukraine right now or in Iran or places like that.
Right.
So what I spotted is that all of these little fears that grow out of the grandmother fear create limiting beliefs for us. They are the little voices about, oh, that girl's never going to accept your invitation to go on a date, or don't try and get that job, you're not good enough, or don't go and stand up and give that speech, it's going to be embarrassing. All of these little fears keep us small. Now, the moment you start to talk about mortality and normalize the conversation about the only thing in life that's guaranteed, is the moment that those fears start to lose their power. And as they lose their power, courage replaces the parts of you that you're scared. Then all these incredible things start to happen. As your anxiety is reduced, your health improves, you sleep better, clarity becomes radically sharp, you get better decisions in life, your relationships improve, your career improves, you might ditch what's no longer serving you and go into a much more soul aligned path. So the benefit will just through the root. And I'm starting to put it all into a brand new wellness unit called Aliveness, which is the philosophy and practice of living fully with the awareness that life is finite.
Mm.
Okay, so that's my life's work now, and I've got a Substack newsletter where this is all starting, and as an ex-filmmaker, I started to make film content, and I've got a coaching program I'm launching and a paid membership community that's coming along as well. And my grand vision is that one day aliveness is big as mindfulness.
Mm.
It'll be taught in schools around the West so that we can breed new generation of kids who are aware of their mortality, do not inherit all of the fears that us adults carry. We haven't normalized the only thing in life that's guaranteed.
Right.
And they grow up to be fearless leaders, stepping into their greatest potential and the powerful stewards of planet Earth.
Mm.
I'm seeing aliveness as a potential catalyst for human evolution.
Wow. That's fascinating, man. That's really cool. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Everything you're saying. It is, the joke is taxes and death are the only guaranteed, but really at the end of the day, it's death. Death is the most, there's no escaping that.
Yes.
You can pull Wesley Snipes and get away from taxes for a while, but you can't get away from death. So that's interesting that when you put a time limit on your life, it really makes you start to really appreciate every moment that you have.
Yeah.
Listening to this and knowing where I was at and even now, I still work a regular 9-to-5 job, if you will, quote unquote. I feel like a lot of people listening are doing everything that we're told to do, right? Like get a job, you have these responsibilities, pay your bills, get stability, have a career, but they still feel like something might be missing. How does mortality awareness kind of reframe that thought process of success and work and then ultimate meaning, because we live in a society that a lot of people chalk up, oh, I work this hard. I work this many hours. That's how I attribute my meaning.
Yes.
How does your, aliveness in terms of impact that kind of mentality?
It's funny. It's actually really simple. When we don't acknowledge our mortality on a regular basis, what happens accidentally or unknowingly is we drift, because when you're not remembering that you're mortal, you're assuming you've got more time. And when you start thinking like that, you start taking life for granted without realizing it. And as a result of that, people drift. So you might take a job 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and think, oh, this is fine for now, not remembering that, the clock is ticking. And suddenly 10 years go by and you become very locked into something that no longer aligns with who you are inside. So externally, you might be paying the bills. You followed the instructions of life. Society told you what to do, get a job, get married, all this kind of stuff. But then misalignment starts to build up inside. And this drift ends up causing major life regrets that people live with, causes depression, can lead to suicide. There's a statistic I found months ago that 2/3 of people in the West die with at least one major life threat. So our avoidance of conversation around mortality leading to drift, regret, and lots of mental health problems for us. Not least, like our inability to find happiness, what should be a good life on, right? When you, especially when you hit the middle age area, between like late 30s, mid 50s, that's when, people start to feel, if they're not aligned, that starts to catch up with you
Yeah.
and bother you on the inside. You can't run away from it. But what you can do is start recognizing what the problem is. When you see what the problem is, it's actually quite easy to fix it. And it comes down to remembering your mortality on a daily basis. And I've just finished writing something called the Aliveness practice, which is simple practice, helps you remember every day that you're alive, and it helps you to remember to get on with the things you're postponing, the things that matter most in life. So it's a kind of course correction practice. It's very simple, and it
Can you
refocuses.
give us a snippet of that now, of that course correction? Or
So, for example, every morning you wake up in bed, before you lean over and reach for your phone, just take 60 seconds and remember that, this day is to be grateful for this day, that you don't have unlimited days. What is it you should be do today that really matters? And it can often be something that scares you, because the things that are going to make you grow and stretch and evolve you and put you onto the right path usually tend to be the things you scare you after you've been in a holding pattern of comfort for years and years.
Yeah. Sometimes it's how you know you're doing the right thing, when it scares the shit out of you.
Yes, and it's quite interesting. I'm starting to think that fear is an evolutionary force.
Interesting. What do you mean by that?
So historically, fear is, again, it's a bit like death, right? It's a villain. Don't do what scares you, or, if it's scary, run away from it. I'm actually, I'd like to do a kind of like a academic thesis on this, but every time you step towards your fear, you discover something about yourself that you didn't know before. It's only when you step out of your comfort zone that you stretch and grow. Carl Jung, the famous psychologist, said, where your fear is, there is your task. With Campbell, the author of the hero's journey concept, said, in the cave that you fear to enter is the treasure that you seek. The ultimate fear is the fear of death, right? So the more you can come to terms with reality, the more ability you have to step into fear, any kind of fear. The more often you step into your fear, the more you practice getting better at stepping into fear, the more courageous you become, the more you discover you can do things you didn't realize you could do before, the more purpose and potential you discover in your life, and more possibilities and opportunities open up for you. So fear, I think, is this breadcrumb trail. And if you follow your fears, it will evolve you as a person onto the path you're supposed to be going.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I love that. I mean, I also 100% agree with that. When you chase that fear and that feeling, which is something, you touched on a couple different things that hit home for me, and I'm sure a couple people out there too, where, you say you get a job, and you're like, I'm just going to get this job, pay some bills right now, get on my feet, figure some stuff out, and then I'll be on my way to what I really want to do.
Yeah.
And then before you know it, it's, 12 years later, and you look behind, you're like, wait, what the hell just happened? Like,
exactly.
This is who I am now.
The thing you really want to do is just still on hold.
Yeah. Yeah. And then actually that fear of doing what you want to do just keeps building ever more, because you become more and more numb and comfortable to, where you're at, and not, becoming autopilot scares the shit out of me as a human being. And that's why, because it numbs you out, and then before you know it, you're like, I'm good in this lane. I'm fine in this lane, even though, 13-year-old, 10-year-old you or 20-year-old you who had these plans and these big ideas to really start jumping into the life that you want suddenly gets kind of smoothed over, and then you're just kind of like, no, this is good. I'm paying my Pico bill on time. So that's fascinating. So
So I guess like everything I'm doing now, I'm trying to figure out the simplest ways to help people break through now and
yeah,
into what they know they should be doing deep down, but they either don't have the clarity to know how to go about the breakthrough, and then they don't have a plan. So, if you go to my Substack, my Aliveness Substack, there's lots of guidance there. And I'm also launching coaching programs that kind of take people through an intensive 6-week rites of passage where we really step over a threshold from one life into the next.
Wow. Yeah, that's cool. Mostly because, I'm sure a lot of people agree that a lot of times you hear these stories and what you're saying, what you're preaching, and people are like, no, there's a life out there. You can get out there and get that. They think to themselves, yeah, but not me. I got 3 kids I got to take care of, or I got this job, I got bills to pay, so it always sounds so good in theory on paper or on a website, but to actually take the plunge and really take that step. The fact that you're offering that on your Substack, and I've been getting your newsletters on my email as well. And like each one of those is, a snippet into like how you can take those steps. I think that's really important for people to hear, that it's not just this guru out there saying, no, come on, look, we can all hang out in fields and dance and live life. Like, these are proper steps, and why it's important for you to accept mortality and then how that can free you.
And it's available to anyone. You just got to give yourself the permission to do it. And you might have 3 kids and a mortgage and everything else, but I can guarantee that your 3 kids would give anything to watch mum or dad revitalize and step into that truth of their purpose, and all the magic comes through a person when they come back to life. The spark, because they're finally doing the thing that they've been postponing all these years. All your kids want that for you.
Yeah.
They didn't want to see mum or dad just, plodding on at like 3rd gear when they could be in 5th or 6th gear on the motorway.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're an example of that, right? I mean, you have kids.
Yeah.
And they've seen you revolutionize their life at this point.
Yes.
One of the things that I found interesting that you touched on earlier was regret. Because obviously regret is also a big scary word, and it's a big part of people's lives. What do you, when you were sitting, bedside by a lot of people, and when you were doing research for this, what do you find was the most common regrets as you did your research, as you jumped into this?
Yeah, so I've done some research, but there's quite a lot of research out there. If you go on Google or ChatGPT, something, the most common regret of the dying is that they didn't live the life, or they weren't brave enough to live the life they knew they could live. Yeah, I think it just boils down to that. It's like they wish they had more courage to try the thing.
Yeah. Yeah, to do the hard things.
Yeah, because you drift, you postpone without realizing it, and before you know it, you're out of time. And life goes quick,
Yeah.
That's problem, and I actually think this is a serious problem. It gets very little attention, it gets very little press, because no one really wants to talk about death. And there's this.
Why is that anyway? Do you have an idea as why? Like, I mean, obviously death is not great. That's a sad thing. It can be a heavy thing, in terms of personally when it hits you. We've all experienced that. But, on a larger scale, when you talk about that mortality and stuff, I don't know. Is it because we just haven't figured out how to gracefully walk into the end yet? Or, what is it about, especially in the Western culture, that
Yeah.
we are so taboo about it?
I believe the reason is that we have slowly over time separated ourselves from nature.
Mm,
So this disconnect that's happened over hundreds of years, um, we separated ourselves from the cycles of life, where we used to be much more part of the fabric and the cycles of nature. And so from a spiritual point of view, we had a much more grounded connection, cosmic connection, whatever you want to call it, to everything, to life and death, you know? So our ancestors, because they had a much deeper connection with life, also had a deeper connection with death. So death wasn't something that was to be feared. It was much like the apple tree, that's what happens in life. It's just a part of life, right? And I think as we've somehow disconnected ourselves from nature, um, death became more and more inconvenient, right? And as we sort of as we disconnected, we started to fear it because spiritually we're lost. We don't have that connection that all our ancestors had. We've lost all our rituals, our customs and traditions around death, education around death. Death used to be much more open, so when someone in the tribe or the community died, everyone would be past that. It wasn't like you die, you get shipped straight off to the morgue before anybody even sees the dead body, which is what happened to my dad.
wow.
Because it's not new education around, no one knows what to do with something like that.
Mm,
I remember when my dad died, I didn't know what to do. So the person, the ambulance people who came to try and resuscitate him said, "Oh yeah, just ring this number." Rang the number, and within half an hour, a mortician arrived, put him in a bag, and put him in the back of the lorry and took him off.
wow.
And that's just how it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
The so there wasn't any time to kind of be around the body, and all of our indigenous ancestors had all these beautiful rituals and ceremonies. Like everyone would get time to process, and you'd be with the body, and people would get to say their prayers and goodbyes, and it's like really considered and beautiful. And now it's like get rid of the body as quickly as possible. Everybody moves on. People know how to grieve quickly. Grieving is a private thing. Proper grieving is witnessed. And so people have to pick up the pieces, and with no education about how to even grieve, and that causes a lot of trauma and damage, long-term damage and psychological problems. There's no integration. So yeah, the whole dying process is a big mess in the West, and no one wants to talk. So I'm sort of taking this challenge on and trying to package it up in a way that makes it accessible. So that's what I'm calling this is about aliveness. This is about how to live fully. I'm on this journey, step into your deepest potential and purpose. And by the way, along the way, we're going to learn about mortality because that's the catalyst for how we get there.
Mm, that's incredible, John. Yeah, you're doing some important work here. Like I said, when I came across you, when our paths crossed, well, actually, you reached out to me, and I was like, "What do you do?" And I had never heard of anything like this. And um, you know, like I said, about mortality and death touches all of us in some way throughout our entire lives.
Yeah.
But yeah, talking to you and then hearing what you're doing, and I'm like, wow, it's really is something that I've come to terms with it. Certainly, when my mother passed away when I was younger and stuff like that, and but that's a really good point in terms of like when you get to the end, it just gets messy. No one really knows. It's always like a crapshoot of who's going to handle what are we going to do, and like you said, there is trauma left over, certainly for me, that I at a young age that I refused to acknowledge, and it kind of spiraled into something until it blew up in my face, and I had to. So, um, and I love that you're also using that to also help the individual themselves,
Yeah.
see why that's important.
Yeah, because, it's about the individual, but it's so funny. Like that once you kind of catch on to the logic at play here, you can see how it affects individuals, but you can then scale it out and see how countries are behaving.
Mm-hmm.
We're all, without realizing it, making decisions based out of fear.
Yeah.
Whether that's as an individual, you're too scared to go for that job that or start that project that's been on the shelf for 10 years, all these little fears holding you back, right? These fears also cause us to hoard because we're scared of the world, everything feels threatening. We do self-preservation and we don't share. It's no wonder we live in a world with abundant resources and the inability to share it all. Look at all it has. And we live in this incredibly unequal world. And it's because we're making fear-based decisions, and all fears grow from the fear of death. The reason we go to war with other countries is because we don't trust each other. We're scared. We're nervous of them. We don't trust them. We're suspicious of them. It's all fear. But the politicians, when realize the reason we're making these fear-based decisions unconsciously is because as nations, we're not addressing the grandmother fear, which is causing us to behave these ways. So
Yeah.
daily that is global, but you can also go down to like the micro level and look how it affects us and how we behave as individuals.
Yeah. Our daily day-to-day and our daily lives.
Yeah.
Man, good stuff. Yeah, more people need to hear about this. I love it. Like I said, I've been, following your emails for a while now, and I love every time one comes through and how you look at this from different angles every single time, and the different points that you hit on. And it's I can't recommend it enough to everybody out there. So, real quick, a couple more questions, then we'll talk about where everyone can find you, how they can reach out to you, find your writing and all that stuff. If someone listening today feels stuck, overwhelmed, or unsure of what direction to go in, how can remembering that our time is limited actually help them themselves move forward?
Because I guess on one level, on first glance, you might think it's counterintuitive, right? If I'm feeling like I'm drifting, I'm a bit lost, the last thing I want to do is think about death.
Mortality, right? Yeah.
But the key is to not think about it in a morbid way. It's, you're not going to die today. What the awareness is remembering that you are mortal. So it's bringing that awareness back in. And from that place, you stop taking life for granted. You start to step into like this deep gratitude, like for this day, for this moment. God, it's so precious. And suddenly you start to look at everyone through that lens and go, wow, I mustn't take my family for granted. This food, wow, aren't I lucky that I'm alive? What a miracle this is. Through all the cosmos, the Big Bang and everything else, I'm here today thinking and breathing and taking a mouthful of this whole food. What privilege. And if you can kind of keep stepping back into that remembering and into that awareness today, then you start to make really awesome decisions from that perspective. And clarity starts to arrive and you start to really see life very differently. So it's just a lens shift from like taking life for granted because we're not thinking about our mortality awareness, and stepping into this beautiful aliveness, feeling of aliveness. And what I've realized is you cannot live life in the fullest or cannot live life greatest expression without the awareness of your mortality. It's like life and death are two sides of the same scale. And death doesn't exist, but life goes out of whack. When you put death back in, you get this beautiful balance. And from there, you live life fully because you're just really grateful for it.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Last but not least, what does braving the bright side mean to you?
Gosh, I think braving the bright side for me speaks to courage, first and foremost. And, you know, I guess it's like stepping into your light, you know, having the courage to step into the light that's available to you. And it is available to all of us.
Hell yeah. John Hoppy, let's give you some time here to shout out where people can find you, and the services you offer and what you're doing to help people out there. All right.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I currently am starting everything with a newsletter on Substack, which you can find at aliveness.me. And there is a guide on there. You can start practicing everything we're talking about, this aliveness philosophy. And there's essays on there, there's audio recordings. I'm actually on Instagram doing content as well. It's called Aliveness Practice. And I'm just about to launch my first coaching program where I'm going to be taking senior leaders and managers and execs, founders through this rites of passage from a life that no longer serves them into a soul-aligned career before regret sets in or health or crisis forces a change on that. So all of that will be public through my Substack channels. So that's where to look right now for everything I'm doing. And there's a community.
Yeah, and I can link all of that too in the episode description for people to find easy, so they can click on it and I'll take them right to it. John, this has been great, man. Listen, I feel like I've already said this like 3 different times, but the topic, you know, is kind of icky for a lot of people out there. So I think you're doing some awesome work and some important work, and the fact that you can tie that into mortality not being a dirty word, but then also using that to really revitalize people's lives and the way they look at their lives and death overall. It's an important conversation, and I feel honored and humbled the fact that I could get to talk to you about it on here on the podcast. So, yeah, I just want to thank you for swinging by, man.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, maybe maybe I'll have you back on.
Definitely.
Once the Aliveness catches on fire and they start teaching it in schools.
That's the idea. Thank you.
Yeah, man. All right, brother. You have a great day.
Cheers, man. Bye.
Whew. John, thank you so much for sharing your heart and your perspective with all of us. I think one of my biggest takeaways is that maybe thinking about mortality really isn't about death at all. Maybe it's about giving life the attention it deserves. If today's conversation made you think about that dream you've been putting off, that phone call you've been meaning to make, or that person you've been waiting to forgive or tell you love them, maybe don't wait another day. None of us knows how many pages are left in our story, but we do get to decide what we write on the page that's in front of us today. John, thanks again for spending some time with us here on the bright side. If today's conversation meant something to you, I'd love to hear from you. You can always reach me anytime at bravingthebrightside@gmail.com. And if you'd like to follow along between episodes, you can find Braving the Bright Side on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. Pretty much wherever people are scrolling instead of doing the things they probably should be doing. If you believe in what we're building here, would you consider leaving a 5-star rating and a review? It might seem like a small thing, but it helps these conversations reach people who may need them the most. It really does make a difference, and I'd be incredibly grateful. Until next time, thanks for spending a little time here on the bright side with me. Wherever life finds you this week, I hope you choose the thing that scares you just a little, because that's usually where the growth begins. Keep braving it. One step, one sunrise, and one courageous choice at a time. I'll see you next time.